Dear students, we hope you enjoyed the break, and we hope that you are ready for your second session here on the industry power track of today. Without further ado, please join me in welcoming our moderator for this session, journalist and anchor at TV2 Business, Joachim Bindslev.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me? Yeah, thank you very much for the warm welcome. A brief introduction. I just turned 30. I've been a business journalist for 5 years. I expected to be a very leftish reporter when I was growing up. My mom, she didn't think that business was important, but now I'm 30 and she's not disappointed, even though that this is where I am so far. I have the pleasure to moderate Peter Bardenfleth-Hansen. He's 46 years old, and he just told me that he changed his job 3 days ago, the 1st of November. So actually, I don't know what he does now. but I presume he's still at Tesla. I hope so. Just a short story. I just researched a bit, and I understand that you, around the millennium, you used to sell wines online with the CEO of PFA Pension, the biggest pension fund, at least commercial pension fund in Denmark. I think that's quite funny, moving from wine online and not succeeding to moving to Tesla, and yeah, it looks like quite a success so far. But yeah, enough about me, Mr. Peter Bardenfleth-Hansen.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah. So it's true. I've changed jobs. I used to be the Nordic director for Tesla. I worked for Tesla since late 2009 and officially 2010. First employee in the Nordics, actually. So those were early days when we just had a small roadster and a tent, and that was all we were given to sell cars with in Northern Europe. Recently, I have moved on to become business developer director for EMEA, which is Europe, Middle East, and Africa. So they sort of they decided that I was so good at opening up new markets that they've thrown me a new bone, which is basically trying to do the same thing that I've done in Northern Europe, in the aforementioned markets. So that's going to be quite a challenge, not least with nice big markets such as Russia and many of the Middle Eastern countries and Africa. So looking forward to that. Anyway, enough about me, and I'm going to be talking a bit about the story of Tesla, and towards the end I hope that you're going to have a lot of interesting questions that I will do my very best to answer. So in basically the mission of Tesla, it is to accelerate the world's transition towards sustainable energy. It is the underlying foundation for the company. A lot of people ask us, how did you manage to grow from nothing to become so big so quickly? We've never heard of you 4 years ago, and boom, you were sort of almost taking over the world of transportation from one day to the next. Well, it's taken a little bit longer, but nonetheless, about 13 years. We were founded in 2003 and put the first prototype on wheels in 2006, which we started selling in 2008. So 8 years ago, we put the first production car in market. But the reason we've been able to do this as quickly as we have is because of this mission that we do have. Because everything we do in Tesla, we always equate it to the mission that we're working out from. It used to be sustainable transportation, but we've sort of changed it slightly to sustainable energy because we feel that it actually resonates better with what it is that we want to do than just the transportation sector. We believe that we need to do something in the situation that we are in globally, and one of the best ways of doing that is looking at the areas in which we can actually make a difference. We feel that doing this in the transportation sector is one of the most efficient areas to be able to reduce greenhouse gases. But we also feel that in order to actually produce energy more efficiently, we should add that to our mission statement. So therefore we changed the sustainability part also to include energy as an all-encompassing part of our mission statement. So I'm going to try it. Whoopsie daisy. There we go. So people say to us, you know, well, you're this fantastic company, you're building cars of the future, it's almost science fiction-ish. However, the truth of the matter is that the heart of what we're doing with the cars is this little AC induction motor that you see here in the picture. It's from 1888, patented by Nikola Tesla, and one of the most invigorating inventions of its time, and also very, very simple. And again, going back to this simplicity part is the foundation for what we do as well. We want to keep things as simple because we believe that simplicity is also equal to the way that you can become more efficient. And a normal combustion engine has somewhere between 220 to 240 different moving parts in it, all of which create friction, heat, and so forth, and of course also consumes quite amount of energy. The electrical motor only has about 4 moving components, and therefore the friction, of course, is much less, and the efficiency is near on 90% as opposed to somewhere around 20 to 22% for a combustion engine. So just in that mere fact, it makes sense. When we're just keeping the environmental aspects out of it, it just makes a lot more sense to go electric simply from an efficiency point of view. So this is one of my favorite pictures because this shows a little bit about what happens if you close your eyes too soon in business. You can think about Nokia, for instance. You can think about Kodak. And you can also think about here, because you can sort of say, well, this is 116 years ago, and the question is, you know, can anybody spot the car? There is one up, I believe, somewhere up around here. There is a car. There it is. And exactly 13 years later, which is the age of Tesla today, which is 13, in exactly the same place. It's a question of, can you spot the horse? You know, it's somewhere down here. But this is how quickly technology can evolve. And this is obviously 100 years ago. Today, technology evolves much, much more quickly. And here we have a quick timeline of the 13 years that I just told you guys about. I'm going to skip relatively quickly over this. However, what's very interesting is this part here, the Gigafactory, which is, again, one of the fundamental key aspects and stepping stones for being able to actually outlive our mission statement, which is to be able to produce battery technology quickly, efficiently, and in such huge masses that will be able to sustain the growth that we're hoping to get the world into. And in particular because we want to have this accelerating effect on not only our own production, but of course on every other production facility out there. Here under all the other OEMs such as Mercedes, BMW, Toyota, and all the other big car manufacturers. We want to make them start building electrical cars. And therefore, we know that one of the main obstacles here is the economy of scales. Because right now, the production price of batteries is very, very high. And in order to be able to make cheaper electrical cars, we need more production capacity. We need more of the manufacturers to build electrical cars so that the parts price per unit gets down so we can build cheaper cars. Right now, almost 100 million cars are being built every year. 100 million cars. Think of this. Actually, last year, there were enough cars in the world that if you put them bumper to bumper, you could reach the moon. I mean, there's 1 billion cars. 1 billion cars on the roads in the world. Think of all the CO2 gases that are coming out there. So it's incredible. So last year, production total of electrical cars was just about 500,000, comparatively to almost 100 million of the combustion engine. So we've got a long way to go, and the only way we're going to get there is if everybody starts building these cars. Some people say, well, you know, aren't you afraid that the competition will then kill you once the bigger cars start producing electrical cars? We don't believe that. We believe that we will be really successful when the others start building cars that are electric as well. Now, another question that we often get is exactly that. Why are you building expensive cars? Why are you, if you really want to change the world, why are you building first the sports car and now the Model S and the Model X? These are expensive cars that are relatively few people who can afford them. And, you know, are you really changing the world? Are you actually doing what you're saying you're doing? And the fact is that a lot of other people have had trials to try and make electrical cars throughout the years. Nobody can remember them because they never survived. And the reason why you never survive as a small electrical car producer is that you will get squashed by the bigger companies. They're not interested in seeing electrical cars out there. And in fact, sometimes I feel as if they almost have financed these small projects just to make it look really stupid, and thereby people thinking, "Ooh, I'm not going to buy electrical cars because these things are never going to come. You know, these are small three-wheel cars that take a week to charge, and maybe they can do 27 kilometers if the wind is blowing in the right direction." But we thought, well, what can we do to change this? Well, we can only do this because the investments that are required are enormous. I mean, usually, for instance, to give you an example, Nissan, who have produced the most selling electrical car to date, which is the Nissan Leaf, I believe they produced somewhere at about 250,000 by now. They spent 30 billion kroners developing that car. I mean, 30 billion, it is enormous sums just to develop one vehicle. And we didn't have 30 billion kroners at the time, nor would probably Leaf have been successful unless we'd come onto the stage. And so we thought, well, how can we do this? Well, what if we build one little prototype, only do 2,500 of these, and we show the world what electrical cars can do. It's going to cost a fortune, but we can show what they can do and thereby actually be able to prove everybody wrong who said that electrical cars are boring, they're slow, and they can't go anywhere. And so we took all the money that we had, or all the money Elon had, and quite literally, and put it into the Roadster. And the Roadster was a collaboration with Lotus. And we built this fantastic car, and it's you know, it's like a museum piece now. But we did it showed the world that you could do you could actually compete with most of the sports cars out there. It cost a ton of money because it was so expensive to build. However, it did attract enough attention both to the markets as well as the bigger car producers to invest money into us. So, in fact, both Toyota and Mercedes invested big sums of money into Tesla back in 2008, 2009. And then we managed to go on NASDAQ in 2010, and we collected enough money to take this next step, which was the Model S, Model X. These are basically the same car. They're sort of built on the same chassis. One is somewhat bigger than the other, but nonetheless, it is pretty much the same vehicle But the end goal here is to get to what we call the Model 3, because that is a car that's going to be mass produced. It's going to be much cheaper, half the price of these, and then we will really be able to start living towards that mission that we have of accelerating the world towards sustainable transport and sustainable energy. So just in regards to this, getting the pricing down, now I was saying that the pricing of batteries has been expensive, and they have been, as you can see, but we're really reducing them now. Also in regards to the battery cost for storage, which is another part that Tesla is investing heavily into. It makes sense that since we are forerunners in regards to developing batteries, that we also start looking at other ways of using these batteries. For instance, being able to store large amounts of energy. We can think of course, some of the countries with a lot of sun that probably don't have as much energy during night. Here under, for example, Africa, there are big markets there that where we could store the energy from the sun and use it at night. But we could also look at a place such as Denmark, where we have almost 50% of our production of wind or energy is from wind. However, we do have an issue with actually storing it, because most wind is produced or most wind energy is produced during the night, and therefore we inherently end up almost giving away energy because we cannot use it. So it would make a lot of sense if we could actually store it and then use it during the day. And again, the other way around when you talk solar cells. So for us, it's really important, and that brings us back to the Gigafactory as well, that we can start getting these pricing down, because not only do we want to accelerate the competition to get pricing down, but we also want to be one of the ones that are suppliers for all the other manufacturers, so that they can get cheaper batteries. Again, the adoption of technology, what we were looking at before with the old cars and the horses, you can see here that the way that adoption rates go, it just goes extremely quickly. So in the world of today, I mean, think about it. When did you guys start hearing about autonomous driving or self-driving cars? I bet you anything, you only just started hearing about it about a year ago, maybe only 6 months ago. Think about how quickly that is moving. I mean, a year ago, everybody thought, I think we only even had the Minister of Transport in Denmark said a year ago that autonomous driving was at least 20 years out. Yeah? And here we are, actually all Teslas built today can drive 100% autonomously. You could put in the address and it can drive by itself. Now, we're not going to do it just yet because the legislation can't follow that yet, so we're not going to let the cars do that. But from October 17th, all the cars that we build have the ability and the hardware within them to be able to do what we call Autopilot 2.0, which is the ability to drive by itself. And so we're getting there. You know, the science fiction is now. You know, we're in the future, which is basically where we want to push everybody a little bit quicker. Maybe it's a little bit like being a teenager who just wants to grow up really quickly. That's what we're doing. So again, yeah, just touching on, went a bit quick there on the autopilot, but again, that is the point here. This slide here is actually 6 months old, and it's already way outdated, because the system actually has now, it says here +2 cameras. It actually now has another 8 cameras, so it actually has 10 cameras now. And it has a radar system that can go now, I believe it's 250 meters forward. So it's actually quite incredible. Another issue, which is something that Tesla really works towards, is safety. We also believe that that's the underlying mission in regards to making our autopilot as autonomous as possible. Because at the end of the day, you guys all know that most faults, whether it be in automotive, whether it be flight crashes, whatever it may be, 99% of the time, it is what we call the fault 40, which is the 40 centimeters from the screen, i.e. the person operating the machine who is at fault. Now, if we could take them away, to a certain extent, then we will probably, or we will, reduce the number of accidents and thereby also the number of deaths in road traffic. And therefore, safety is a huge part for us, both in regards to the autopilot, but also in regards to the way that we build the cars. Because in old days, i.e. a couple of years ago, or all our other people who are building cars actually put the engine out here. It's a big lump of metal, and what happens is, if you have an accident, it's like having an elephant sit on the front of your car, and as soon as you hit something, it's just going to go flying through. And basically, some people mistakenly think that, oh, well, if I have something heavy out front, I'll be safe because it actually will help me. But it doesn't work that way. It actually stops very quickly and it will move towards wherever it can, which is generally into the passenger compartment, and that's not nice. So what we've done is we have produced the electrical motor that you saw before is quite literally no bigger than a big watermelon, and we put them between the axles, and I say them because we've actually have two motors, one on the front axle and one on the rear axle, and thereby actually ensuring and putting all the weight and all the batteries in the bottom compartment. We actually make the cars much more rigid, and ensuring that even in accidents, the crumble zones are in a way that the car can actually fold, so we can sort of control the way that accidents are, thereby making it the safest car basically ever built. Luckily, all the other OEMs are using the same type of methodology when building cars now, i.e. putting the batteries in the bottom and putting the electrical motors between the axles. So here we see it a little bit. We call it the skateboard, basically, because that's the whole car. Everything else is just there for future for making it nice and easy to drive. But basically, what you see there is the whole car. Now, one of the biggest obstacles when trying to build an electrical car is convincing people that it is as good as the fossil fuel car. In fact, Elon said recently that starting up a car company is completely idiotic. Starting an electrical company is idiotic squared. So which actually underlines pretty well the way that we think in Tesla, because we seem to be setting ourselves some pretty crazy targets, and then we just throw ourselves into it, and we work relentlessly until we sort of get there. But one of the main obstacles was this charging part, because people have what we call range anxiety, this idea of not being able to get from A to B, and that's despite the fact that most Europeans, and here on the Danes, don't drive more than somewhere between 80 and maximum 100 kilometers a day on average. I mean, it seems that most people buy cars for that one or maybe twice a year that they're actually going to drive more than that, and that is actually quite an interesting way to observe the way that the patterns of the consumers. Luckily, it's changing. I mean, a lot of you will probably have heard of the various car sharing systems and companies that are starting to pop up, which is fantastic. It's this way of being able to share vehicles, and most of them, and in fact, I think all of them right now, they're electric, which is even better. So the idea of having this range anxiety slowly wearing out, but nonetheless, it's still there. And bizarrely enough, Danes are some of the worst ones that suffer from this out of all Europeans, despite the fact that we have such a small country where, you know, there's hardly anywhere where you can't go on either a normal car, fueled car, but even a Tesla can go basically anywhere in Denmark on one charge. Yet you still have this idea that, ooh, I have to be able to go to southern France if I feel like it. But what could we do about that? Well, we invested basically all our money in trying to come up with a very quick charging solution, which is what we call the Superchargers. Now, there have been other ways of trying to solve this. Some of you will remember there was a Danish-Israeli company called Better Place that unfortunately didn't do very well, where you change the battery, which the idea is, well, you drive in, you change the battery, and then you put a new one in and drive off again, which would be okay. The only thing is that a battery is very, very expensive, as we saw before, and you never know who has had that battery before. And the thing is with batteries is that they very much are dependent on the way that you use them as a consumer and as a driver, i.e., do you do quick accelerations? Do you frequently charge it to the fullest and so forth, which basically has an effect on the way that your battery life will be. And so the idea of actually only getting a battery in that maybe isn't as good as the one that you had is difficult if it is something that you have ownership of. Of course, the whole idea with that was that you leased the battery, so you never really owned the battery. But then it was really difficult to sell the idea that you only bought half a car and you'd have to rent it. So there was a long, good reason for why Better Place didn't work. We decided not to go that way. So all our cars are made so you can quick charge them. And we have this infrastructure of superchargers. Now, this again is actually, it says opening in 2016. It's actually already outdated. Each one of these spots that you can see have a supercharger. Most of these are 135 kilowatt. Now, the battery is the biggest battery right now is 100 kilowatt in one of our cars. So you can do the math yourself. So we can basically fill a battery for up to 600 kilometers of range in less than 1 hour. Now, most people will need to stop for an hour when they do 600 kilometers. So we believe that by having an infrastructure the size of what you see here, which looks like a bad case of measles, but nonetheless, will actually make you be able to go anywhere you want to. I mean, you can go all the way from north of the Arctic Circle all the way down to the southern part of Italy using superchargers. And the fantastic thing with the superchargers is it's quick, but it's also free. So could you imagine of going in, buying a Mercedes or BMW or Volvo, and on the way out they say, oh, by the way, if you go on long distance driving, we will pay for your fuel. I don't think that's going to happen. Whoops, there we go. Another one of these areas that we really wanted to do a difference in the way that we do business is to become part of the millennia company that we are. So we wanted to change the way that we do business in general, and we also wanted to be able to change and develop our company quickly in adherence with the way that our customers wanted us to. So in so doing, we try and keep the path between the concept, engineering, up to the customer as short as possible. And one of the main things here is that we listen to our customers and then we implement it extremely quickly, retroactively to the engineering and the manufacturing, so that any changes that are required we can do very, very quickly. Examples of this is, of course, what makes it easier is the fact that we have connected cars. So all the cars have their own means of communicating. So they all have a SIM card, and we are in constant contact with the vehicle in regards to being able to upgrade it or be able to get data from it if it has a problem, and thereby being able to solve it much quicker. That is actually one of the most important parts of Tesla, is that we have this ability to constantly upgrade vehicles, so that when you buy a car today, it probably won't be the same as tomorrow. It is very similar to the way that you have your smartphones, where you every sort of month or two will get updates. It'll ask you, do you want the latest update? It is the same with Tesla. The car will ask you if you want your latest update, and it will either optimize the current systems, or it will start enabling new systems. Here under, for instance, what we talked about before, the Autopilot 2.0 will have what I refer to as like sleeper hardware that hasn't been activated yet. So then you can then retrospectively activate existing hardware in a way that the car never did before. So we have, for instance, examples of this has been, for instance, upgrading maximum speed from 210 to 250 kilometers an hour, enabling the suspension to go higher than it had been before. For instance, our Norwegian customers over a couple of winters felt that the way that the car drove in deep snow had to be slightly higher because it was deeper up in northern Norway. So we did an over-the-air update for Norwegian cars so they could raise the suspension higher, and so forth. Many of these are possibilities that we can do with over-the-air upgrades. Another way where we wanted to change the way that we purchase cars is of course doing it over the internet. Now everybody in here will think, oh yeah, of course, because it is so normal to be doing that today. But only 4 or 5 years ago, or even 10 years ago, it was unthinkable. And actually, still in the car business, it is still unthinkable to be buying your car online. You cannot buy a car in the normal sense of the way in Tesla. You can come into a Tesla store, but the only thing that'll happen in there is, of course, we'll have our product specialists who will help you out, and they'll tell you, and they'll smile, and they'll tell you all about the product. And you also can meet a sales advisor who will tell you about the ins and outs and the price. However, at the end of the day, if you say, I'd like to buy this car, they will say, okay, we will help you, and they'll set up a profile on the internet, and the purchase will happen there through your user profile. So you could be sitting at home, you could be sitting at 10 kilometers of height in an airplane, or you could be sitting on a beach and buy your car. The place and location is no hindrance in regards to buying a Tesla. And again with the software updates, I mean, these are incredible ways of being able to ensure that customers also get away from this idea when you buy a car that once you drive it out of the showroom, it loses value because it's no longer a new car. Here, it gets better, and comes back to the same story with the wine, gets better with age. The Model X, which again, although it's pretty much the same as the S, it's built on the same chassis, it is setting new standards, not least because of the Falcon doors, as we call it, but also because it's the first electrical car that has towing capabilities, which is a big seller here in Jutland, as you all know. And the Model 3, which is basically the end game to a certain extent of where we want to go. It's certainly where our mission is setting us. Of course, hereafter we want to make things even cheaper. We want to integrate things a lot more. We want to make sure that you can either get your power from solar panels or wind energy, that you store it at home, and then you charge your electrical car. We want to make your life as a consumer and as a world citizen as sustainable as humanly possible. And we feel that we are the ambassadors to be doing this. And again, all these are sort of key milestones that we're doing. These are already way out of date, so I'm not going to bore you with those. And again, I would say, relentless innovation. Anybody who follows Tesla and particularly follows Elon Musk will know that that is the truth. He seems to be every week comes up with some new fantastic idea, whether it be moving to Mars or building hyperloops or building autonomous cars, making solar panels on top of our, as part of our buildings and so forth. It is really relentless innovation put to the test. And basically working in Tesla, it is like that. You never know, again, a little bit, you never know what you're going to wake up to the next morning. So it's quite funny when we have events with Elon Musk, because you will inevitably see somebody running around behind him, writing down everything he says, because he will come with a new invention, and then we will be left to try and explain it afterwards, and we'll be, oh, what did he say? And then we'll have somebody sitting there transcribing to ensure that we know what to be expecting questions on the day after. So I think that sort of concludes my slideshow. I'm sure if some of you haven't fallen asleep yet, I can answer some of the questions.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for an interesting presentation. I'm really annoyed I can't buy a Tesla. I don't have the money, and because of the politicians, the possibilities are even smaller within the next couple of years with regards to Denmark, and that leads us to the most popular question. It's from NIP, N-I-P. I don't know who that is, but it's a popular question. It is, how do you try to influence green politics in Scandinavia? I know there's quite a big difference between Denmark and Norway, especially maybe Sweden as well. And what impact will the removal of reduced tax have on electric cars in Denmark? And we've seen it already so far. The sale has just plummeted. But yeah, how do you lobby and please succeed in that?
Yeah. Well, there's no doubt that if you want to create change, change needs to come from the legislators. I think a lot of people would like to create change, but at the end of the day, particularly the more expensive the change that you're trying to implement, the more people will think with their wallets. So if you want to create change in the transport sector, you need to use what we call the bonus-malus system. You need to give the carrot and the whip at the same time. The carrot being that you reduce the cost of whatever it is that you're trying to make interesting or actually change, and the whip, or the malus, being the part where you make whatever it is you want to change from more expensive or less desirable in one way or another. And for extreme examples, you can see Norway, for instance, where the government has decided quite a few years ago that they wanted to ensure that the transport sector became electrified as quickly as possible. And they decided that by doing that, the best way of doing this would be to incentivize this as much as possible. They took away the registration tax. It's a system that's a little bit similar to the one we have here. The end result is basically almost 120, 150% of taxes on combustion engine. They took that away, so similar to Denmark last year. But they also took away the VAT, i.e. the mumps, And they also took away the pricing for parking, using ferries, free of charge, going across bridges and tunnels, free of charge, and also charging. Of course, Tesla supercharging is free, but also all other charging was free, and is today still. And that, of course, made changes, huge changes. They also went one step further. They decided, well, you know, people who drive electric cars should get to A to B much quicker. So they were allowed to use the bus lanes to drive in. And all of these things really accelerated the way that Tesla or electrical cars actually entered the market. When I started in Norway in 2010, 2011, there were the number of cars, exact number of cars on the roads of electrical cars that are in Denmark today. So in Denmark today, there is just about 8,000 electrical cars. And when I started in Norway, there was about 6,500, something like that. And by the way, there are 8,000 electrical cars in Denmark. There are 2.4 million fossil fuel cars in Denmark. So 8,400 electrical cars. So talk about a storm in a cup of tea when they're talking about, ooh, we're losing all the money on the taxes. 2.4 million combustion engine cars. Anyway, back to Norway. Basically, what was going on there was that within a very few years, of course, Tesla came and a lot of other came, and they, instead of saying, okay, we're going to set a date, we're going to set a number. So they said 50,000 electrical cars is what we wanted. And by May 2014, there were 50,000 electrical cars. Now, we're, I think, 140,000 electrical cars. So now they've raised it. They said, okay, we're not going to start looking at taxes or even mumps until we reach 200,000 cars, because they have about the same number of combustion engine vehicles on the roads in Norway as they have here. And they also know that the change that is required if we really want to make a difference in regards to the CO2 and also in regards to actually getting the world to change towards sustainable transportation is about 1 million cars. So by 2030. And strangely enough, the Danish system is also based on 1 million cars by 2030. But that ain't going to happen. I can tell you that. So again, going back, we're not going to get any more electrical cars in the roads here unless you incentivize it. I'm not saying that electrical cars should get a free ride forever, but in order for people to take that change, you need to make it viable economically to do so. And right now it isn't.
And what I have to follow, and what are your expectations regarding the Danish politicians really listening? Because there's a majority in the government that wants to change the law that was made last year, but when it comes down to business, they're afraid of like losing the money from registreringsafgiften and stuff like that. But what are your expectations? Like, realistically, will we have just a similar situation as they have in Norway within a couple of years, or will it just be a fossil fuel country?
I think that what we have in Denmark right now is governed by this new mantra called green realism. And the green realism being that we shouldn't be paying excessively for the green change, hereunder not incentivizing any change, whether it be within the transport sector or wind energy. And I think that certainly with the current government, we're going to see very, very few changes. There may be a couple of small incentives here and there to try and push the sales into motion, but the fact is that the taxation system right now, that the way that electrical cars, they're being phased into the existing taxation system. And we have only seen step one, and step one killed 98% of the sales. We still have step 2, step 3, and step 5 to come. Step 2 coming on January 1st, and I'm sure they'll take care of the last 2%.
Very depressing, unfortunately, at least if you want an electric car revolution. Yes?
Yeah, talking about lobbyism and so on, and having very strong organizations to promote the use of electric cars. Do you think our two organizations now, FDEL and the other organization, are strong enough to push the politicians?
No, I don't. Remember that if the last year was the best year for electrical cars in Denmark, and that was 4,500 cars out of 207,000 cars sold. So that is approximately it's about just over 1%, 1.5%. Now, when 1.5% start to let's say make a lot of noise, the 98.5% of the others start thinking we need to do something about this. So yeah, we are lobbying, but I can tell you what, that the others are lobbying as well. And it's not just the car producers, it's also the oil producers and basically any company that has money tied up in fossil fuels in one way or another. And therefore, yeah, we're trying, but at the end of the day, it will fall on relatively deaf ears, because there will be, for every one of us, there'll be 9 or 10 of them trying to lobby the other way.
But can I just tell you a little short story? I was one of the organizers of the world's largest electric car parade during the Silkeborg Highway opening in September this year.
Which was fantastic, yeah.
We gathered more than 400 electric cars from 5 countries, and nearly half of them were Teslas. And we loved the cooperation with Tesla. I'm not paid to say that, but it was great. Philip, Kenneth, all the others. But even FDM, the United Danish Vehicle Owners Organization, didn't support. But what was positive was that the Danish Vejdirektoratet, they asked me and some others, could we make another event? And we would like to create an event which should lobby towards the politicians and the Crown Prince, everybody was there, but also to show the world's largest noiseless car parade, which was incredible in itself. And I think it gave perhaps some perspectives. We've tried to lobby since that day.
I completely agree, and those types of events are very commensable, and I think it's fantastic. And we need more of that. Although I'm afraid that from the authorities' side, it is what we refer to as greenwashing. Unfortunately. But as quickly as this change was implemented, which is only just over a year ago, it was on October 9th last year, that as quickly it can be changed again. So we can only hope that at some point or another we start looking over our own borders to see what our neighbors are doing, and not least in one of the world's largest car-producing nations, Germany, where they're actually implementing quite a few changes to the tax systems and in regards to vehicles requirements to actually accelerate further electrical implementation on the German roads. So and Sweden the same. Sweden really wants to go green. They're discussing the ban of combustion engine cars in 2025, on 2030. The same in Germany. In Norway, 2025. I know Iceland are looking at 2022. Holland, 2025. That's in 8-9 years. They're actually looking to ban the sale of combustion engine cars, whereas in Denmark we're actually lowering the registration tax, and this year will be another world record in the number of combustion engine cars sold in Denmark, which will be almost 250,000 cars this year.
Okay, just disappeared up there. A lot of questions that people want you to answer is about the Danish taxation system, and it seems clear to me that it's not very popular with Tesla, to say the least. A question that has come a couple of times and that interests me as well is, what about the arguments from the guys lobbying against you? isn't it very polluting to produce these batteries? Isn't it, a harm to the climate? Can you just hand to your heart and say, this is a lot greener and environmentally friendly?
It is a lot greener and a lot more environmentally friendly. It is. It is a lot greener and a lot more environmentally friendly. The production of batteries is I can tell you, is the total production and CO2 usage of producing a Tesla is right now about equivalent to the same as producing a similar sized combustion engine vehicle. That is a fact in the production phase, yeah? But as soon as it drives out of the factory, it becomes a completely different story. And of course, we're trying to reduce the CO2 footprint in the production methodology as well. And the Gigafactory that you saw will have one of the largest solar panel roofs in the world, if not the largest. And we're trying to make that completely sustainable. And so also the rest of the production. However, once it drives out of the factory, it doesn't really matter where that electricity comes from. Even if it's 100% coal-produced electricity, it is still a lot more efficient than burning fossil fuels in a combustion engine. So it will inevitably be greener and more environmentally friendly, no matter which way you want to twist and turn this.
Okay, and the last argument, that was Morten Messerschmidt's argument. I remember he said that it's coal-based, that electricity, but that doesn't matter. I would like you to send some documentation on that, and then I can share.
Well, there's a lot of documentation we want from Morten Messerschmidt. So.
Touche. A big discussion in global business is protecting the technological edge you have. At Tesla, you've decided to make everything open source. How can you do that and at the same time keep your technological
advantage? Again, going back to what I was saying earlier, this is very much a part of the economy of scales. We are not going to be able to produce cheap electrical cars until others do the same. Because, every time we do something, we have to build it ourselves because we cannot go out and get it on the open market. And even when we try to, the big OEMs control most of the sub-suppliers. And they generally do not allow for them to sell to us, whether it be a little button to control the windows, or whether it be the way that the metal for the axles, whatever else it may be. We have to basically produce most things ourselves because we can't get the suppliers to supply it to us, or because they just don't know how to build it. So we know that in order for us to make cheaper units, we need mass scale. And mass scale will come when the other 89,500,000 cars are actually electric, because then all the parts will become much cheaper and we'll be all much happier and we'll be able to produce cars. And we hope that because of the front runner edge that we've had, and also because we have more legs to stand on in regards to the whole part of Tesla also being towards the sustainable energy part, that we will be able to keep being innovative even when all other cars on the roads are electric.
I would recommend you call Margrethe Vestager on that first one with the suppliers not being allowed. I think she would take some action on that. The next question, and you've touched upon it. You just mentioned the Danish guy, Henrik Fisker. No, that was at the previous presentation. A Danish guy, Henrik Fisker, a person has asked, what will this mean? He just presented a car last week or something like that, driving 600 and something kilometers. And the charge is a lot faster, he says. He has a very big he has a very big mouth, and he hasn't delivered on everything that he has promised. I'm fascinated by him, but I haven't seen the final cars. But how do you make sure that you won't lose market share to all these other players, and when Volkswagen as well want to sell many electric cars in just a few years?
At the end of the day, it's about the product and the company that we represent, and whether people believe in Tesla, and they believe in the product, and they believe that what they're buying is also the quality that they want. I'm not saying that Henrik Fisker's cars aren't fantastic, or they're certainly extremely beautiful, but I can definitely tell you that from a prototype to production is very, very seldom that it takes less than 4 to 5 years. And I can tell you from the way that where we started just 4 or 5 years ago to where the automotive industry will be 4 or 5 years from now, I believe that the 600 kilometers is not going to be one of the areas that we're going to be discussing. I think it's going to be a completely different world and a lot more autonomous. But again, we do not see currently these other attempts as being threats. And it's not because we are big-headed. It's simply because, again, we want them to be successful. We believe that we do have the innovative edge, and we will keep developing that. And we also believe that because of us having taken this lead role and actually being able to get to the Model 3, that we will be able to sort of complete that proof of concept that actually elevates us to being able to compete head-on with the others once they get there.
So you're not nervous at all. We have time for one more question. Thank you so much for all the questions. I don't know if it's possible for you to answer some of the ones we haven't touched upon in writing, maybe later on.
Yep.
But yeah, the last question, where do you see Tesla in 5, 10, 20 years? Another one asked if it's science fiction now, what is it in 5, 10 years?
It's ludicrous. That's what it is. Who knows? Flying cars. We'll have the first Superchargers on Mars. Something like that. I mean, just take this year, 2016, with all the fantastic innovations that we've put out this year alone. I think in 5 years, who knows? I'm not going to speculate.
Will everyone drive autonomous cars in 5 years?
I think most of new cars. In fact, I would venture the fact and say 95% of new cars on the market in 5 years will have autonomous capabilities to one extent or another. Even the standard ones will have that. Yeah.
We'll see. Thank you so much, Peter Bardenfleth-Hansen.
Peter Bardenfleth-Hansen, on behalf of Aarhus Symposium, we would like to say thank you so much for such an interesting presentation on how to design a greener future with Tesla Motors. Please accept this small gift as a sign of our gratitude. Thank you. As for you, Joachim, thank you very much for your contributions throughout the day. We're truly happy to have you here. Please accept this gift as well. Now for all of you, one final message. Please note that your next session will be back here in the Jyske Bank auditorium at 3:30. On your way out, as you leave this auditorium, please do not hesitate to stop by our coffee lounge. It's outside here on the right hand. Here you can interact with the speakers and our partners today and ask some of the questions that you may still have. Thank you and enjoy the Arla break.